it's Casey, and today we're going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. So this is a tag that goes around in like June and July of every year that basically has people check in on how their reading has gone so far this year and talk about books that they've really loved or maybe not loved so much as the year has gone on. So I did this tag a little bit late last year. It was pretty shortly after I started my channel, but even though this year I haven't read nearly as many books as I had this time last year, so there's less to pull from, I've still read some books that I'm really excited to talk about. So the first question is, what is the best book you've read so far in 2020? And there were several that I wanted to choose for this. I'm trying not to repeat books or series too much. I definitely do. I'm gonna go ahead and say Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. I think this is my favorite book I've read so far this year. I haven't actually given that many books 5 stars compared to what I had last year, but this is the second book in the Stormlight Archive, and it is a high, amazing, epic fantasy series, and it is probably one of my favorite fantasy series that I've ever read. I'm absolutely loving it, and even though I'm late to this party, it's amazing. But the first book, Way of Kings, was one of my favorite books of last year, and then this book topped it, which I wasn't expecting, so I think this has to be my favorite book I've read so far this year. It's so good. We're learning more about the world and the characters in this one than we did before, and the plot is getting more and more intriguing, and I am so sucked in every time I read this book. This book is huge, and I blew through it faster than I've read basically anything else this entire year. Like, I burn through these every time I read them, and I am so excited to keep going. This is probably my favorite book I've read. The next question is, what is the best sequel you've read so far in 2020? And for that, I'm going to pick Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. So this I almost picked for the first question, but I feel it fits even better on this one, because this is the second book in the Live Ship Traders series, which is Robin Hobb's second series in her greater realm of the Elderling universe. In this world, when 3 generations of a family die aboard a live ship, it becomes alive and basically becomes a sentient talking sort of character. And this follows the Vestrit family as the live ship Vivacia is quickened. And when this happens, the daughter of the family, Althea, expects the ship to be given to her, and in a upsetting turn of events, it is not. And this book is a multi-perspective fantasy that follows all of these different family members. And I liked the first book. I think I read it in December of 2020, and I gave it 4 stars, I think. I liked it. It was very, very good. But this one blew me away. This stepped up the game. Like, this stepped up the level of the series so much for me that I feel like it deserves the best sequel spot, because I loved this so much more than I did the first one. The plot twists and turns were incredible. The character development was top tier. Robin Hobb just like wove this amazing tapestry, and it was like finally becoming a little bit more visible to us in this one, and I'm so excited to read more of her work. But yes, best sequel so far. Next question is, what is a new release you haven't read yet but you want to? And for that, I'm going to be picking The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. So this is a West African inspired fantasy book that released in April, I think? It was released in February, so I'm quite behind. But this is a West African inspired fantasy that follows our main character, who has always been kind of an outcast from her village, but she's hoping to fix that when she goes through the coming of age like blood ceremony. And during the ceremony, however, her blood runs gold, which is the color of impurity. So she's approached by a woman who basically says, you can stay in this village and face the consequences for this, or you can come with me and fight in this army with people just like you. And I have heard a ton of good things about this book, plus the cover is absolutely stunning. And I think it also got picked up for an adaptation, so again, this is one that I really want to get to. I've heard a ton of good things, and I really need to get my hands on a copy of that book. Next question is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? And in trying to come up with an answer to this question, I realized I am super out of touch with what is coming out, so I need to do some research on this. But I think my answer for this is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. So this is a new novella that Becky Chambers is releasing, I think in mid-July, so barely the second half of the year. But it follows a world where robots gained sentience centuries ago and then basically all just kind of wandered off into the wilderness. But this follows our main character, who is a monk, and a robot comes seemingly out of nowhere and comes up to him and says, what do the people need? And he can't move on until he's given the answer to this question. So it basically follows this robot and this monk as they're going to try to answer that question. And I love Becky Chambers' writing, and the premise of this sounds so interesting, and I've really been getting more into novellas lately, so I'm very much looking forward to this one. What is your biggest disappointment so far for this year? And that for me is gonna have to be The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. So this follows a girl named Nora who is completely unhappy with her life, completely miserable, and she ends up attempting suicide, and in doing so she finds herself in this place between life and death known as the Midnight Library. And in this library there are books filled with basically different versions of her life had she made different decisions, and she can go through and read those and live that life and decide if that's where she wants to be. And basically goes back through all of her regrets and sees what could have been different. And I love the premise of this so much, but the execution just fell really flat for me. I think I ended up giving this 2 stars. which I was really disappointed about because I thought I was gonna love this. Most people I've seen reviewing this have really enjoyed it, but for me this just felt like it was very surface level and it could have gone a lot deeper for the premise that it had. So it just really didn't blow me away. It really didn't hit me the way I wanted it to, so probably my biggest disappointment. Next question is biggest surprise so far this year, and I struggled with this one a little bit because I don't think, looking back on what I read, there was anything that I read expecting to feel kind of neutral on and then ended up loving. But I think I'm gonna go with Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. So I read the first two last year. I think I gave the first two 4 stars. I really liked them, but they weren't like hitting me the same way they seemed to be hitting everyone else. Like the series completely well loved, and I just wasn't feeling it so much. So going into this, I expected to like it at kind of a 4-star level or potentially a 3-star level, because sometimes the endings of books can fall a little bit flat, especially since there was so much going on in this series. I wasn't sure if they were going to wrap it all up in a way that was satisfying to me. And this was my favorite one of the entire series. Like this ended up blowing me away way more than I expected it to. I gave this one 5 stars. So because of that, I'm gonna say this was the most surprising. But this series follows a con woman named Nari who lives in 14th century Cairo, and while she's engaging in one of her rituals, she accidentally summons a warrior djinn who whisks her off to the city of Daevabad. She finds out she might be more deeply entrenched in djinn politics than she previously thought, and this series wraps up so well. Again, I thought the ending was so strong. This is probably my favorite entry of the entire series, so I would say this is the most surprising. The next question is favorite new author, debut or new to you, and honestly, this question made me realize that I've been finishing out series and reading from authors that I already know a ton so far this year, but probably my favorite new author so far this year is Nicholas Ames, who wrote Kings of the Wild and Bloody Rose. These books are just so fun, and the writing style is so accessible while being very interesting and gripping. So both of the books so far in the series have been great. I think I rated the first one 5 stars and this one 4.5, but I really love the writing style and I'm absolutely looking forward to the 3rd book, and anything else that he publishes I will 100% read. Next question is newest fictional crush. So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this one, but we're just gonna say Adolin Cullen because I love him so much, and we're gonna move on with our life. So what is your newest favorite character? And I struggled with this one a lot too, because again, I've been finishing out a lot of series or continuing on with series that I've already read. But I think for that, I'm going to pick the Fool from the Realm of the Elderlings. I know I read the Farseer trilogy last year, but I read most of the Live Ship Trader series this year, and I've been working on the Tawny Man series. And I really liked the Fool in the original trilogy, but in the later books, the Fool has just skyrocketed to become one of my favorite characters, so I think that's who I'm going to pick for this question. I absolutely love the trope of like the jester or the fool who knows way more than everybody else and kind of has this like almost omniscient point of view, and that's kind of what's going on with the Fool in this series, and I just love them. The next question is a book that made you cry.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't.
I don't want to talk about it. What is a book that made you happy? And for this, I'm gonna pick Kings of the Wild, which I'm still lending to a friend, but I think I said in my review that this is the most fun I've had reading a book in a long time, and it's still the most fun I've had reading a book all year. This is just such a good time. It's got just the right amount of humor while also having some emotional gut punches in it. And it reminds me so much of a D&D campaign, and it's kind of written that way intentionally. And it's just so much fun. I've got to say this book probably made me happier than anything else I've read so far this year. What is the most beautiful book that you've bought or received so far this year? And for that, I'm gonna say Gods of Jade and Shadow by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, because this cover is absolutely stunning. It's probably one of my favorites. Like the spine is beautiful. The colors are some of my favorite colors, and it's just gorgeous, and it's unlike most of the other fantasy covers that I have. Amazing. 10 out of 10. And the final question is, what books do you still need to read by the end of this year? And the answer is a ton. There are several series that I said at the beginning of the year I wanted to read. Like the First Law trilogy, I would love to start sometime this year. That would be great. I'd really like to get farther in and catch up with Stormlight by the end of this year and a lot of Brandon Sanderson's books. As far as books I've gotten a little bit more recently, I really want to read Song of Achilles and I really want to read Red Rising. Both of those I'm super looking forward to, but haven't been able to like fit in on my TBRs yet. Oh, and I'd like to read another book by Becky Chambers, because I keep talking about how I love her writing and I love her books, and I've literally only read one. So I really need to just finally get on that and continue on with the Wayfarer series, like, so badly. So if you guys have done this tag, please let me know. I'd love to watch them, or if you just want to answer some of the questions in the comments, I'd love to see what you guys have been up to. But I think that's all I've got for you guys today. If you want to keep up with what I'm reading, I have a link to my Goodreads down in the description below, but other than that, I'll see you guys next time.